Hey guys, how are you? I have another story for you guys today, and I'm working on a few more, so be looking out for those. Um, Sorry, my little cat is attacking things. Um, so, kind of wanted to touch base with you guys and just say there are times I'm not going to be able to make the post every day like I want to, or every other day. There's life gets in the way sometimes, but I am still trying, and I pray that you guys are enjoying these videos, and some of them are pretty educational for you. But I'm gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about this one. We all know a lot of people are murdered every day, and there's many different reasons they're murdered, honestly. Whether it be for money, love, accidents, jealousy, or just for the enjoyment of, because you know that some serial killers really just want to kill. And even though that murder leaves people questioning, how could someone do something so heinous like what they do to another human being? But this case will really make you wonder. This next case will make you really think, oh my God, what is wrong with people? It has a lot of twists and turns that will have you on the edge of your seat, that's for sure. So you're going to have to stay with me. Just, there's a lot of different twists and turns, and I'm so glad that this case was actually one of the ones that I found that was actually solved really quick. So, let's go ahead and start on this story, okay? So on March 12th, 2011, in Berthsetta, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., would start just as any other day for a manager of the Lululemon athletic store. And I think a lot of us know those. Like, those were the really popular leggings that were out a couple years ago, like, that were really popular. And so this manager would arrive at the store just before 8 a.m. so she could, of course, open the store for the day. But when she arrived, she would never imagine what she would witness that day. As the manager went to unlock the door, she noticed that the door was already unlocked. At first, she would just think that the two saleswomen that worked that night before maybe forgot to lock it up. Or maybe someone actually came in early and to help assist with opening it up early with her. But as she entered the store, her eyes just like lit up and could not believe what she had seen. There were cabinets that were all open, garments and accessories strewn across the floor. The store had been ransacked. She couldn't understand it, and she just stood there frozen for a little bit. And then she was like, okay, I gotta get in here and investigate. I hope nobody's hurt. I hope this happened when nobody was here. So she would, with her heart pumping, go ahead and step in and be like, hey, is anyone here? And she would then all of a sudden hear a moaning coming from somewhere in the back of the store. So at that moment, she's like, nope, can't do it. She ran right back out and saw a man across the street that was waiting for another store to open, and said, hey, can you go into my store? My store has been ransacked. I'm going to call 911 and report this, but I heard some moaning in the back. Will you please go and look at it for me? And the guy was like being a good Samaritan, and he was like, sure, no problem. Well, the man went inside to inspect the store, but when he got to the back of the store, the manager would hear him scream, like a hardcore yelling, screaming, saying, you need to call the police right now. There's a body back here, and there's another woman tied up. I think she's been assaulted. Immediately, she calls 911 and makes the call and reports it. And when the police arrived at the scene, they would find the floor was covered in blood. And the body in the back, there was a body of a woman laying face down. And that woman would later be identified as 30-year-old Jana Murray. Then in the bathroom, they would discover another woman who was tied up and barely breathing in the and so this young woman would end up, and they ended up taking her to the hospital, but this young woman was 28-year-old Brittany Norwood. Now, she went to this nearby hospital where she would be examined, and the officers would note that she had escaped with minor injuries, a few cuts on her face and arms, and a few bruises, but nothing major. Now, back at the store, other officers were going through the crime scene. There, they would notice that in the blood, there was 2 sets of shoe prints. There would be a really large shoe print that could have been a man, and then there was a really small shoe print that possibly could have been a woman. So in their minds, they're like, okay, we have more than one assailant. Now, while the officers at the hospital would be questioning Brittany about what happened, she would tell them a scary story. Brittany and Jana were working together that night. They were the ones closing the store that night. And when they were locking up on March 11th, they locked the doors and had left and said their goodbyes, and they were headed home. But after Jana had already pulled away, she realized, oh no, my wallet's inside. So she immediately says that she calls, embarrassed, she calls Jana and was like, hey, can you come back and unlock the door? I have to get my wallet. I left it there. Please. And so she was like, no problem. And she came back to help her to get into the store. And as the women were entering the store to retrieve Brittany's wallet, that is when 2 masked men would barge in through the back and attack the young women. Now, they would end up tying both of them up and then proceeded to sexually assault them. During the assault, though, Jana would decide, nope, this ain't going to happen to me. I'm not going to let it happen, and started fighting back and resisting the attackers. She's like, nope, and kicking them, hitting them, trying everything to get away from these people. And Brittany would say that's when they started beating her. They hit her, they kicked her, they just beat her. And then they ended up stabbing Jana. They stabbed her multiple times. So Brittany, scared to even fight back and worried that maybe she would end up in the predicament that Jana is in. She didn't know if Jana was alive or not. But she was like, after she saw it, she didn't think that she was. And so, since she didn't want to meet the same fate as her co-workers, the attackers, she said, would go and assault Brittany with a clothes hanger. And they would tear the crotch out of her pants. During this interview, everyone was just like stunned because Brittany had so much detail about the attackers. Like, in something like that, I know personally, from personal experiences, when attacks happen or anything like that, like, your mind is everywhere trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to, how am I going to get out of this situation? What am I going to do after this situation? Just like, you're everywhere, but you do take in some of what's going on, but you're not going to remember every little detail until probably later on after you've calmed down and the adrenaline has wore off. Well, Brittany, on the other hand, it was almost unbelievable to the officers that during this very extremely stressful situation that this woman went through, that she could still process everything about the attackers. So after telling the horrific story about what happened on March 11th, the police told the nurses that they needed to preserve any DNA they could find or any other forensic evidence they could get off of Brittany's person. Her clothes, do a swab, check her. They wanted everything. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on these women, okay? That way you can kind of relate to them a little bit more and kind of understand these women. Jana Murray, like I stated, was 30 years old. She graduated from Johns Hopkins University. She was born November 20th, 1980 in Wichita, Kansas, which I've lived in Wichita, Kansas. But she would be raised in Houston, Texas, where I lived. And Jana would be described by her family and friends as a bright, loving, compassionate, intelligent, and an adventurous woman who was extremely devoted to her family. Okay, so she had a good family life. She was very comfortable in her life. Now, Brittany Norwood was one of 9 children. 9 children. And her father owned an upholstery business. And in high school, Brittany would show off that she had amazing athletic skills. And in fact, she later was recruited by Stony Brook University on a scholarship to be a defender on their soccer team. And she loved soccer. She absolutely loved soccer. So she would play for them from 2000 to 2003. Then her life would kind of go whoop, because she was then in 2003 accused of being a klepto. And if anybody knows what a klepto is, it's somebody that doesn't even know they're doing it. They just snag, like, people that smoke do it with lighters all the time, where they just pick up a lighter anywhere, or they use a lighter and it's a friend's lighter and then it just happens to go into their pocket. That's klepto. Officers, we do it with pens. You can't leave your pen nowhere or it's going to be picked up. It just happens. But it's normal. But she was an extreme klepto. And she was also not just stealing from her teammates, but she was stealing from other classmates and roommates. So after being kicked off the team, for stealing nonstop, it still would not stop her. Like, she was still majorly klepto. And it ended up making her lose her scholarship and be expelled from school. From there, Brittany would decide to move to D.C. to live with one of her sisters. She would get a job working at a front desk at William Intercontinental Hotel. And she would be so liked and respected, and she made her way. She got promoted real fast, and she got promoted to managing the VIP guests that came into the hotel. Now, even though Brittany had a promising future at the hotel, you're like, okay, well, what was she doing working at an athletic store? Well, Brittany wanted to be a personal trainer. Even though she had a good job, she still wanted something different. So that's how she ended up going to the Lululemon store. And she would have only worked there 3 weeks before she was attacked, guys. 3 weeks. So that's why she didn't have a key and she had to call Jana to come back, because Jana was a veteran there. And so the manager was comfortable enough leaving her with the keys so she could teach Brittany how to lock up and everything, the way to do it. Now, after this attack, the whole community was on edge, worried about the horrific attackers and when and if they would attack again. They started doing the buddy systems. Women weren't allowed to walk out at night. It was crazy. This community was scared. And what made the whole situation even worse was that there was no eyewitnesses, no security cameras, and no evidence of a break-in. So they had nothing to go off of. The police were actually stunned by the fact that they had nothing to go off of, but the only information that they had at all was the statements from a few workers at the Apple computer store next door and Brittany's statement. Now, the funny thing is, and the thing that kind of really got the investigators like, okay, something's not adding up here, was not just the fact that, like, it was amazing how much info Brittany could obtain, and everything like that. But when they interviewed the Apple workers next to the store, they said that around 10:30 p.m., the night of March 11th, when the attack happened, they heard two women arguing. They would hear sounds of dragging, grunting, thudding, and high-pitched squealing. They would even go to say that they heard two voices, and one would be saying, "Talk to me, don't do this, talk to me, what's going on?" And then another voice would end up saying, "God, please help me, save me," like screaming for help. Now, with this information, like I said, the officers decided that they needed to go ahead and talk to their only one living witness and find out more about what actually happened that night. So on March 14th, at Brittany's home, they decided to interview her, going over her whole story again. Here, Brittany seemed to kind of break down and cry uncontrollably from the trauma and was just so upset, which I know it happens. You don't want to relive that, and they're making her relive it again. And she would end up giving even more detail than what she did the night when she was at the hospital. She would say that it was one of the men was about 6 foot tall and the other was probably about 5'3". 5'3"? That's a very specific height, okay? But then on March 16th, the officers would ask Brittany to come down to the station so that they could collect fingerprints and hair samples so they could eliminate her from the suspect list. They were just following protocol like they're supposed to. But that was not 100% true, because I told you the officers had issues believing Brittany's story, and it didn't help matters that when the hospital would inform them that when they did the sexual assault examination and try to get evidence and collect evidence and everything, they found no evidence at all that she was assaulted. And the nurses also informed them that all the injuries Brittany had sustained during this attack were all superficial. So how did she get attacked and come away with superficial? Yes, she didn't fight back supposedly, but only had superficial wounds. But another woman's dead with extreme battery, and in an extreme way, guys. Like, it doesn't make sense. So with all of this, the officers were like, okay, we got to take a closer look. And that's when they decided that they were going to pull all the evidence out again at the scene and the evidence collected, and they would find some very compelling things. But they would keep this very quiet during the investigation. They never wanted it to leak out, nothing. Then on March 17th, Brittany's family would call saying that Brittany has more information for them that she hid because she was so scared of these attackers because that they would return and finish the job. And so she didn't say anything, but now she wanted to get it out there. So now, guys, this is where the story got really crazy, and it really made the officers like, okay, and it made me like, yeah, after all of this, there's something not right about this story at all. Because Brittany would go and tell them in the middle of the attack, the suspects would untie her and force her to go outside on her own and get in Jana's car to move it about 3 blocks away and come back in. Run! But when she said she did it alone, she also stated that the suspects had told her that they would be watching her, and if she tried to run or signal for help, they would find her. Now, guys, right there, like I said, I was just like, she's lying. She has to be lying. And I'm 100% sure, like I said, the officers were like, okay, yeah, this ain't right. Because what kind of men that just assaulted 2 women and killed one would allow the one and only person that could identify them loose, thinking that she wouldn't run away or signal for help? Why would somebody do that? It just did not make sense. But some of the evidence, like I said, that the officers had kept quiet, the officers were already ahead and everything like that. And they were like, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and just let her leave anyways. Now, just 6 days after that awful murder, the manager for the Lululemon store and the owner would offer a $125,000 reward for anyone who could help find, apprehend, and convict the 2 subjects that did this to poor Jana. They assaulted Brittany. And they even had a community vigil for Jana. And at that vigil is when police did something that shocked the whole community. They arrested Brittany Norwood and escorted her to the police station. Now, everybody was just shocked. They're like, why are they arresting her? Maybe they're doing it for her protection. Maybe they found something out that they need to keep an eye on her. But when they would get to the station, they would sit Brittany down and start questioning her even more extensively than they had the other times. The officers would double down, especially on the crazy story about the car. Like I said, they didn't believe that one. They would ask, why didn't you just leave? She would go on to say that she couldn't just leave because the suspects had seen her ID and some mail that she had in her wallet and said that they knew where she lived. And she even would state she was so scared that when she passed a cop while moving the vehicle, she didn't say anything. That is when the officers were like, yeah, no, none of this is true. And her story was completely ridiculous and made no sense at all. As they started getting really, really aggressive with the interrogation of Brittany, that's when she would start showing that she was getting really mad and stated that she just wanted to go home. But the officers were like, nope, that's not going to happen, ma'am. And the officers would put in front of Brittany all the evidence they had found and kept quiet. The only place that she was going was to jail, because they did find evidence of her DNA in Jana's car. But along with that, they found the scene had looked like someone had tried to clean up, because the display window, there was a size 14 shoe that had evidence of blood on it, and it looked like somebody had tried to clean it up. And the smaller shoe print matched with the same shoes that Brittany wore that they had collected from the hospital. The size 14 also matched the bigger size. So what, did they just wear the shoes and then take them off so they didn't get their shoes dirty? And why was her footprints in the blood if she was tied up? So after presenting all the evidence to Brittany, sorry guys, Brittany was actually arrested for first-degree premeditated murder, and then she was also convicted of second-degree specific intent to kill murder. Now, 7 months later, on October 6th, 2011, at the trial, the whole awful truth would be brought to light. On March 11th, it was the first time Jana and Brittany would be working together. And since Jana, like I said, had been at the store longer, the manager entrusted her with showing Brittany how to lock up the store, like I had said, and give Jana the keys. And everything went smooth until it was time to leave that night. Because the store has a policy that no matter who you are, even managers and the owner and everything, before you leave at your shift or the end of the day or whatever, that they have to do a bag search, and then the staff could leave. But this is when Jaina would find a pair of yoga pants in Brittany's bag. So after removing the pants, Jaina questioned Brittany about it, and Brittany would deny it and say she didn't know how they got there. Somebody else could have put them there, but those two were the only ones working the store that night. And instead of staying there just to argue with Jaina, she would just go ahead and have herself and Brittany leave the store, and she would just deal with it later. And Brittany already knew in her head that she was caught and that she was not going to get away with this, because Jaina was going to tell the manager tomorrow. And Brittany would lose her job and possibly worse, be arrested for theft because of her kleptonism or whatever, however that word is. But she knew like it wasn't going to happen. So this is when Brittany would come up with a plan. She would call Jaina back to the store and handle the situation. But the only problem was since Brittany was so new and she was didn't have that kind of relationship with Jaina, she didn't have Jaina's phone number. So Brittany would have to call another staff worker or co-worker that was there and get Jaina's number from her, and said that she had left her wallet inside the store and just needed to retrieve it. And then once Jaina arrived, she went to unlock the door for Brittany, and that's when Brittany started going after Jaina. But the thing is Brittany didn't think, like, she just thought it was going to be something easy. But Jaina was like, I'll show you, I'm not going down that easy. And during a more than 20-minute struggle, Jaina would endure so much pain, guys. The officers had found multiple different weapons that were used on her, and there was exactly about 5 different weapons, guys. 5 different weapons that were used to assault and murder this poor woman. And these weapons, they would include a hammer, wrench, box cutters, and even a merchandise peg. And what these merchandise pegs are they're used to assemble like store mannequins. They're used to like make them stand and everything like that. So then the coroner would even state that Jaina would end up sustaining 330 separate wounds, including 105 defensive wounds. Now, guys, she had so many and a lot of blows to the head that they couldn't even count them. But she fought. She was not going to give up. And even if she was going to die, she was going to go die down fighting. Like, that was her mind. And I'd be the same way. No, you're not going to take me out of this world. And if you do, I'm going to make sure that I cause some damage, and I'm going to do something to you. And this poor woman, was bludgeoned, choked, and stabbed. And the evidence even showed that even after having all these serious injuries and being hit in the head with a metal bar from one of the shelving units that ended up shattering her skull and breaking her spine, she was still alive. She was enduring. She could feel all this pain. Oh my God. Like, I couldn't imagine it. My heart it makes me sick to my stomach, and my heart just, for her and her family, just having to hear this during trial about all the things that this woman had to go through during this assault. Her family had to live that, and she lived that. And they found out that the final thing that ended up ending Jaina's life was a stab wound to the back of the head. It was like an execution. And that's what ultimately ended her life. And after Jana was no longer breathing, Brittany went out and moved her car so no one could see it. So that would kind of give her at least 10 hours to get back in the store and kind of doctor it up to look like a robbery gone wrong before the manager would open up in the morning. So she would try to clean up the shoes and put them back. And then she would ransack the store herself and open the store safe. There she would remove 3 bags of money. Nobody knows where this money went. And she would end up cutting the crotch out of her own pants to make it look like she was assaulted, and use zip ties to bind her hands above her head like this and bound her feet. Now, that's a lot. Like, she was going into this hardcore to cover up this murder and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. And because then, after she did all of this and tied herself up, she would stay all night in the bathroom until morning when the manager arrived, of course. So there was just so much evidence on this, and the information that was given, like, there's so much evidence brought up during the trial that Brittany ended up having to change her plea because she was still trying to plead not guilty. She changed it to self-defense, which, I'm sorry, no juror's going to believe that, because the entire time, like, all that, if it was self-defense, no. She would have had more defensive marks on her than Jana did. And Jana had no reason to attack this woman. So, and the jury did also not believe, also didn't believe this story of self-defense, because during the 8-day trial, Brittany showed no remorse, guys, like nothing at all. And she would always come into court smiling and happy. So when the jury deliberated, guys, the jury deliberated, and it only took them 21 minutes. 21 minutes, guys. And to sentence Brittany to life in prison without a chance of parole. She was done. They did not believe her at all. And I'm sorry, I wouldn't either. But that's my personal opinion. But there she would be sent to a Maryland Correctional Institution for Women in Jessup. He needed to say one last thing to the family, okay? And with no remorse, she would even state, and I quote, "I need you to hear how deeply sorry I am. I am sorry." That's all she wanted to say. I need you to hear how deeply sorry I am. No remorse. No emotion. Just, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. I think that the only reason she is sorry is because she got caught and didn't go away. Didn't get away with this diabolical plan that she had. Sorry. But now, before I end this, and before I let you guys go and kind of think about this case, I want you to know something. It's very sweet, and it brought a smile to my face after how heinous this crime was. The store that Jana had worked at and was murdered in, it honestly stayed boarded up and closed until the trial started. Now, when they reopened in 2011, Jana's family would be asked to attend the ceremony for reopening. And there they would be presented with a beautiful tribute dedicated to Jana. Right above the entrance of the store, there was a stained glass mosaic, and it was engraved in with the word love. I thought that was a good, sweet note to end on. It's still there today, dedicated to this beautiful woman that's life was taken way too early. But again, thank you guys for watching. And I really hope that I can hear some of what you guys think. And I'm sorry for almost dying on camera. But thank you guys, and stay blessed, guys.